people walk into banks on the same day. Both borrow $50,000. 5 years later, one person has turned that debt into $500,000 in net worth. The other is buried under payments, drowning in interest and barely keeping their head above water. The difference is not luck. The difference is not income. The difference is understanding one fundamental truth that separates the wealthy from the struggling. Not all debt is created equal. Today, you will discover exactly why the rich embrace certain types of debt while avoiding others like poison, and how this single distinction creates empires or destroys financial futures. The debt most people fear is the debt the wealthy use to get richer. Welcome back to Finance Insight in High Def, where we give insight to proven financial principles and how we can use them to improve our daily lives and build towards a better financial future. If you are new here, consider a like and subscribe as we dive into the 8 principles on why the debt most people fear is the debt the wealthy use to get richer. The definition that changes your financial life. The first principle is understanding what debt actually does. Debt is borrowed money that must be repaid with interest. But this simple definition hides the most important question. What are you using that borrowed money to acquire? Good debt is money borrowed to acquire assets that generate income or appreciate in value. Bad debt is money borrowed to purchase depreciating items or consumables that lose value immediately. The direction of cash flow after you borrow determines everything. Most people use debt backwards. They borrow money to buy cars that lose 20% of their value the moment they drive off the lot. They finance vacations that create memories but destroy wealth. They charge designer clothes on credit cards at 24% interest rates. Meanwhile, wealthy people use debt as a tool. They borrow at 4% to invest in rental properties, generating 12% returns. They leverage credit to acquire businesses producing ongoing cash flow. They understand that debt is neutral. What you do with it determines whether it builds wealth or destroys it. Robert Kiyosaki explains this perfectly. Good debt is a powerful tool, but bad debt can kill you. The wealthy see debt as leverage. The poor see debt as a trap. Both are correct depending on how they use it. The leverage that multiplies returns. The second principle explains why the wealthy actively seek certain types of debt. Leverage allows you to control large assets with small amounts of capital, amplifying returns when used correctly. Consider a practical example. You have $100,000 in cash. You could buy one property outright for $100,000. Or you could use that money as a down payment on 5 properties worth $500,000 total, borrowing $400,000. If properties appreciate 10% in 1 year, the first scenario gives you $10,000 in gains. The second scenario gives you $50,000 in gains on the same $100,000 investment. This is leverage in action. Warren Buffett used leverage early in his career. His investment partnerships in the 1950s used borrowed funds to amplify returns. Even today, Berkshire Hathaway carries billions in low-cost debt because Buffett understands that debt used to acquire income-producing assets accelerates wealth building. Mark Cuban took on debt to buy the Dallas Mavericks for $285 million in 2000. Today, the team is worth over $3 billion. The debt was good debt because it purchased an appreciating asset that generates revenue year after year. The formula is simple. If the asset you purchase with borrowed money generates more income than the interest you pay, you are using good debt. If the asset loses value or generates no income, you are using bad debt, the bad debt that destroys futures. The third principle shows why consumer debt is financial poison. Bad debt carries high interest rates, finances depreciating assets, and creates payments without building equity or generating income. Credit card debt is the clearest example. The average credit card interest rate in 2026 is around 21%. If you carry a $10,000 balance at 21% interest making minimum payments, you will pay over $21,000 in interest alone over 15 years. That $21,000 in interest could have been invested instead. At 10% annual returns over 15 years, it would be $87,700. The true cost is not just the interest paid, but the compound growth lost. Car loans represent another catastrophic form of bad debt. A new car loses approximately 20% of its value the first year. If you finance $40,000 at 7% interest over 5 years, you will pay nearly $47,500 total for an asset worth maybe $25,000 when the loan is paid off. Nicolas Cage famously accumulated massive bad debt purchasing exotic cars, rare artifacts, and multiple properties he could not afford. He spent $150 million on items that depreciated immediately. The debt crushed him, leading to financial ruin despite massive income. 50 Cent filed for bankruptcy in 2015 despite earning over $100 million in his career. His debts came from financing an extravagant lifestyle and luxury purchases. All bad debt, all wealth destruction. The pattern repeats constantly. High income creates the illusion of affordability. People finance luxury items thinking they can handle the payments. Then the payments compound, income drops, and the debt trap closes. The strategic use of mortgage debt. The fourth principle explains why mortgage debt can be good debt when used correctly. A mortgage for a primary residence is neutral debt. A mortgage for rental property is good debt because the asset generates income. Consider someone who purchases a $300,000 rental property with 20% down, borrowing $240,000 at 4% interest. The monthly mortgage payment is approximately $1,150. If the property rents for $2,000 monthly, the cash flow after mortgage is $850 before expenses. Even after taxes, insurance, and maintenance, this property likely generates $300 to $500 monthly in positive cash flow. Meanwhile, tenants pay down the mortgage principal, building equity. Over 30 years, the tenant pays off the $240,000 mortgage completely. The owner ends up with a fully paid asset worth potentially $600,000 or more. This is good debt creating generational wealth. Barbara Corcoran built her real estate empire using mortgage debt strategically. Grant Cardone owns over $4 billion in real estate purchased using mortgage debt. He leverages other people's money to control income-generating assets. The education debt paradox. The fifth principle addresses student loan debt, which exists in a gray area. Education debt can be good debt if it leads to significantly higher earning potential. It becomes bad debt if it does not increase income enough to justify the cost. A medical student borrowing $300,000 to become a doctor is likely making a good investment. Physicians earn $200,000 to $500,000 annually. The credential creates lifetime earning potential worth millions. A student borrowing $100,000 for a degree with average starting salaries of $35,000 is taking on bad debt. The income will not justify the cost. The calculus is ruthless. Does the degree increase your earning potential enough to justify the debt? If yes, it is good debt. If not, it is bad debt. Over 45 million Americans carry student loan debt totaling $1.7 trillion. Many will spend 20 to 30 years repaying loans for degrees that did not increase their income. The business debt that builds empires. The sixth principle shows why business debt is among the most powerful wealth-building tools available. Borrowing money to start or expand a profitable business is good debt because the business generates returns far exceeding the interest cost. Elon Musk took on massive debt to fund Tesla and SpaceX. Both companies nearly failed multiple times. Today, Tesla is worth over $800 billion, and SpaceX is valued at $180 billion. Jeff Bezos borrowed money in the early days of Amazon to finance inventory and infrastructure. Today, Amazon is worth over $1.5 trillion. The debt was the catalyst. Sarah Blakely started Spanx with $5,000 and no debt. When she sold a majority stake in 2021, the deal valued Spanx at $1.2 billion. Her avoidance of debt meant she retained more equity. The critical factor is profitability. If the business generates more cash than the debt service costs, the debt is good. The interest rate that determines everything. The seventh principle focuses on interest rates. The cost of borrowing determines whether debt is manageable or catastrophic. Low-interest debt used to acquire appreciating assets is good debt. High-interest debt is almost always bad debt. Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway has borrowed billions at rates between 1% and 4%. This cheap capital is deployed into investments returning 10% to 20% annually. The spread creates wealth. Credit card debt at 24% interest is nearly impossible to overcome. Even if you invest borrowed money and earn 10% returns, you are losing 14% annually. The formula: if you can borrow at X% and invest at Y% and Y is significantly higher than X, the debt is good. If Y is lower than X, the debt is bad. The wealth building formula. The final principle ties everything together. Good debt is a tool. Bad debt is a trap. The wealthy understand the difference and act accordingly. Use debt to acquire assets that generate income or appreciate in value. Avoid debt for consumption or depreciating purchases. Borrow at low rates. Invest at high returns. Warren Buffett used debt strategically. Robert Kiyosaki built his fortune using debt to acquire real estate. Every major business empire was built using leverage. The person who borrowed $50,000 and turned it into $500,000 used that money to purchase rental property. The property generated income, appreciated in value, and the debt was paid off by tenants. The person who borrowed $50,000 and ended up struggling used that money to finance a luxury car, a vacation, and consumer purchases. The debt compounded while the assets disappeared. Two people, same debt, opposite outcomes. The difference was understanding good debt versus bad debt. This single distinction separates those who build generational wealth from those who remain trapped in payments forever. If this breakdown of good debt versus bad debt has given you insight on borrowing and wealth building, share this with anyone who needs to understand that debt is not the enemy, misused debt is. Hit the like button and subscribe for more financial principles and insights that separate the wealthy from the struggling, the empires from the ruins, and the free from the trapped. Many of us feel like we are buried under misused debt and would like to be able to move out of it and towards good debt.